Okay, there were some questions, and Ruth Watson, I want to say that yours did not show up on the screen of the chat. I'm not sure where they went, but you might want to, if you want to ask those, they're not in the chat. So, Elliot, thank you so much. This was absolutely brilliant. And although it didn't necessarily address the specific comments and concerns that we came up with, if you want to bring yours up, from what we sent to Mike and to Elliot, that's fine to bring it up this now. And then we could talk about the next steps. Who would like to go first? Are we all stunned into silence? Okay, Ruth Watson, go ahead.
Elliot, that was just really one of the most encouraging, and you know, you say every now and then I sort of just get really fatigued with it all and go, God, when it's going to happen. And listening to you talking, it's just like, yes, we're ready, let's go. It's actually really, really encouraging. So thank you so much, because we do sound like a grown-up country and we can do it, and it just seems much more. I think that for a lot of people, the whole thing about, you know, the hope is that the lifeboat, you know, that the ark is being built, and then when it comes the day, you know, when the floods come, the door's just going to get kicked open. And I just feel like there's a really, you know, that you're a really competent first mate there with the compass and the maps. I'm not sure which questions, Sharon, you say haven't shown up. There was a few things that I was thinking as you were going. One of them is when you're talking about Faz Lane and the nuclear issue. I mean, as a former peace camper, I feel very strongly about this, but I do understand the pragmatic aspect. So I was asking, so is what you're proposing a deal for a base similar to what's in the Philippines, which has, you know, America, which has had lots of problems because it's kind of treated like a sovereign state. So would it be possible to have a lease, but one which Scotland wasn't ceding sovereignty, because that can be problematic, getting that back from unwilling powers. The other thing was, I was, as an adopted person who, my dad's Irish, and so when I went to see about getting a European citizenship for my children and me, I can get it, but my children can't, but their cousins who are biological descendants of my father can. And that's the kind of thing that would have really hurt my dad, you know. So I was really encouraged to see that adopted children, adopted people and their descendants would be treated as equals. And that really made me feel like, you know, we're going to, that to me, that was actually one of the things that stood out as us being a caring All Jock Tamson's bairns. It's not just lip service. The thing is, like people in Malaysia, live in Malaysia, work in Singapore, go through border controls every day. And I think that I'm very encouraged that you're talking about our military as a defence force rather than an expansionist force. But I think that while I completely agree with you that it's, we need to be careful of our borders to the south, because looking at English politics, I'm not sure that if a Nigel Farage type figure came into power, there wouldn't be saber rattling for political gain. But it's probably best not mentioned in the debate. Anyway, no, the other question I wanted to ask you was, when you're talking about Scotland not being a part of the European Union, I completely get that we wouldn't be a part of it, but would it not be possible during the transition for us to have put in a sort of request to membership, which would give us some accessibility and some rights? So that's me, I'm done. Thank you very much for a really interesting morning.
Thank you. I mean, on that last question, I think that would have to be negotiated, right? I think if we had a clear understanding that Scotland was going to become independent on this date, and the UK government had accepted that, then we might be able to do some pre-negotiation to put some interim arrangements in place. But I'm coming up against the limits of my expertise here, right? Because I'm not an international lawyer. I specialize in constitutions rather than international law. And because I'm not deeply familiar with the workings of the EU. But from the conversations that I've had, I think we would have to fulfill the criteria. but I think we could have quite an expedited process. But as to how much could be done on day one, I suppose what would happen is on day one, we would be in a no worse position than currently under the Brexit withdrawal agreement. Right? So it would, it would then be a question of how quickly. I think the first thing is to get back into the customs union, right? And that could probably happen quite quickly, and then we start a process for the rest of it.
Can I just follow up, Elliot? That would be in the section 83 of the miscellaneous and transitional provisions, and it does talk about international agreements, transitional international agreements. The way it's written, it doesn't exclude EU membership or applying for associate membership or any of that. It in fact contains it, right? I mean, it's in there. We can set up international agreements in a transitional sense. That's the way I read it.
Yeah, I mean, so this constitution comes in effect on Independence Day, right?
Yeah.
That's the idea. So there is power there to enter into transitional international agreements.
Is that standard in the constitutions that you've seen, that there's, but that's part of it, is these countries that are now independent can start making their own agreements with
So on day one of independence, you can start making agreements. The question is, if we know that we're going to become independent on, I don't know, the 31st of March of a given year, how much can we have in place by the January that's already negotiated, already signed, already ready to go, so that on the 1st of April, those agreements then come into effect?
Okay.
And I think if we have a negotiated, planned out transition process, this is all project management, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that was completely missing from the Brexit debate, that we need to get right in Scotland. We need to see this as a mega project. This is a transitional mega project where it's going to need very careful project management. And one of the things you would do when you're managing a project like this is you do concurrent activities, and you say, okay, we need to do, before we do this, we need to do that. So we know this is happening at this point. So by this point, we need to have made those arrangements so that they can come into effect on that day. Otherwise, we're going to delay the whole thing or cause problems. So I think we can't enter into treaties until such point as we're independent. But we can certainly prepare, negotiate, have everything signed and ready to go so that they come into effect on Independence Day.
Okay. I'm looking at you, Monag. You guys are the experts. Okay.
Just no, it's really good to hear about that, and that is sort of what we had anticipated, that things could be prepared in advance, would have to be prepared in advance, so that things like international agreements are ready to go on day one. And as you say, Elliot, yes, it's massive, massively complex, but it is project management essentially. So yes, thanks for that.
Thank you. Good. Ian.
Yeah, territorial waters. Prior to 1999, I had no idea that there was such a thing as Scottish territorial waters and English territorial waters. I thought it was just UK territorial waters. And then in 1999, I think Tony Blair and Donald Dewar came to an agreement that they would change the boundary from, and this would be Scotland's territorial water, and this would be England's territorial water. Now, and then when it comes to independence, how do you establish territorial water? Is it an international thing, or is it just an agreement between England and Scotland? Or will there be an international body that will say this is Scotland's territorial water and that's England's territorial water, or our UK's territorial water? And so I'm a wee bit confused about how it's decided.
Okay, so there are principles of international maritime law that apply, and there are rules that are accepted by states, I think under treaty, although it's a long time since I've studied this in detail, where there are established criteria for what is your territorial water, how do you mark the territorial boundary according to where your borders are, where does your exclusive economic zone go out to, etc. So there are established principles of international maritime law that apply. I think in terms of the maritime boundary between what would then become, either the UK or England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, or whatever it becomes, and Scotland, that would have to be part of the part of a treaty negotiation, right? There would have to be, first of all, a Scotland Independence Act, which Westminster would have to pass to tidy up its own law, right? So that it removes Scotland from its jurisdiction. So it could be in that, but I think it would also have to be in a treaty. There would be a treaty between the RUK and Scotland where a lot of these things would be negotiated, and it would have to be in there. And again, I think we can, I don't hear people talking about this, right? But when we talk about the naval base and we talk about electricity and water resources and the maritime boundary, distribution of debts, distribution of assets, all of this stuff needs to be negotiated. That's what sensible grown-up countries do. And what we've seen from the Brexit is that the UK state doesn't have that capacity.
Okay.
It can't sensibly negotiate those things. So we need to be thinking, like, we should have in Scotland a negotiating team that is forming now, that's doing research, that's thinking about all of this stuff. Reciprocal healthcare arrangements, right? If somebody from Carlisle needs to have an operation and they need to go to a hospital in Scotland, there should be a procedure for that, and a reciprocal arrangement that works the other way, and then the funding just changes hands, right? That all of this stuff can be done. But I think what we need to do is to not be in the Brexit position of having made the decision and then having to make that decision work. And it astounds me, I mean, that so little of this work seems to have been done. We've had a pro-independence government in the Scottish government since 2007, and we don't have a draft treaty of independence. Right? I've been working on the Constitution because that's my bag. Where is the person who is an international lawyer who works with treaties rather than constitutions, that has studied the process of state formation in the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and who did their PhD on the independence of Norway from Sweden, who is coming up, and has worked for 12 years with the UN doing, transitional arrangements in East Timor or on the independence of South Sudan, who brings that same level of expertise that I have in that field, who's working on this stuff. Find that.
Do you know any people that have that expertise?
But we need to find that person.
We do. Yeah.
And it's just astounding to me that the Scottish government, don't have that person. I mean, you could probably find someone. They might not be Scottish. You know, but there are people out there who do have that sort of knowledge and expertise. You know, they're not very expensive. You could probably get their services for, I don't know, 120,000 a year. Right? That's a big salary by Scottish standards. It's not a big salary by global standards. But someone, you would find someone, I think, for that kind of money, who would do a good job. But what it requires is the political decision to actually understand the independence process is not about politics. It's not about winning a referendum. It's about state building. And winning a referendum is only part of it. And I think that's the key message that we need to send out to people at all levels, not when we're campaigning on the doorsteps, but when we're lobbying internally within our organizations, with the Scottish government, with party system, with the parties. We need the people at the top to understand what they're actually trying to do. So if we are serious about Scottish independence, it is not about getting rid of London rule, because simply getting rid of it solves nothing. It is about building better. And it's about having those institutions and processes in place and doing the homework. And I sincerely hope that somebody somewhere is doing that homework, but I fear that they're not. And we can't be taken seriously until we can say, okay, here's the draft treaty. What is it here that you object to? And then we can have that sensible discussion. Anyway.
Good.
Yeah.
I think I've asked Mike Russell to come to one of our meetings. I would think that might be the next step here, is to ask him, having been in the Scottish government, does he have a sense? And then do we need to go to somebody in the Scottish government?
Well, I would think, you know, I often hear people say that, you know, it'll take 2 years from when we vote for independence to actual Independence Day. Now, I think with all these things during the negotiations, Westminster will try and drag it out as long as it possibly can. I could see it going on for 3-4 years. And perfidious Albion, you know, we know that they can't be trusted in negotiations, and we've just seen Brexit in Northern Ireland and the protocol and all this sort of thing. So I think it's right. We really need to have a good team in place to be involved in these negotiations.
Absolutely. And have clear positions before the referendum, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a key thing.
It shows that we're not really ready for a referendum. We're not really ready for the people to say we're ready. I mean, there's a lot of stuff they don't know. We're now much more educated in what we need. We know that there's a draft interim constitution. It's not been accepted. It's not run through the Scottish government, whatever it needs to run through. Those are things that we're just going to have to push for this. Having the experience and listening to Gordon McIntyre Kemp talk about how he has tried to get these things through to the Scottish government and the ministers. And the other night, I mean, Nicola, it just rolled off her tongue, wellness. He had to hammer that again and again and again to ministers, all different ministers, because they didn't get it. So if they're, and what you shared with me, Elliot, was that this isn't seen as a priority by the Scottish government necessarily. It's not seen as foundational. It's seen as one of the, what did you call them, planks, like currency and defense and those kinds of things. It's not seen as foundational.
Yeah, I mean, I use the analogy of pillars, right? Like the sort of front of a Greek temple. So I think they understand that there are various columns that need to be put in place and that the Constitution is one of those columns. I don't think they understand that the Constitution is the foundation on which the other columns sit. So you can't talk about the armed forces until you have a constitution which will say, okay, well, who's going to be commander-in-chief of the armed forces? Well, that's technically the head of state, but they act on the advice of the First Minister. How does the First Minister know about these things? Well, there's a Defence Council, there's a National Security Council. What control does Parliament have? Well, they get to set the legal framework, they get to approve declarations of war, they get to scrutinise defence expenditure. And then we can have a discussion about defence policy, within and on top of that constitutional foundation. So yeah, I think they understand that Scotland needs a constitution, and that is something that has changed in their thinking over the last 12 years or so. But I don't think they yet understand that the constitution is foundational. They see it as just one plank, and I think they're quite scared of having a public discussion about this. And I think the public discussion about this is potentially transformational, because it I've had a number of conversations. I was speaking to someone who was she was a Labour Party member, Scottish Labour Party member, opposed to independence. And I said to her, okay, let's imagine independence did happen. What would you like the first Labour First Minister of an independent Scotland to do? And she couldn't understand the question, because for her, an independent Scotland is an SNP Scotland.
Ah, okay.
An independent Scotland is a Scotland in which there is never a Labour government, because Labour opposes independence. So the idea that an independent Scotland can have normal democratic politics, where parties go in and out of power, where we no longer have to have a politics that's dominated by the constitutional question or the status question, and that we can instead have a politics that's based on recognizing the fact that Scotland is actually an underdeveloped country. Underdeveloped in as much as it is not a country that has reached its development potential. I'm in Delft now, right? The public transport infrastructure of Delft would put everywhere in Scotland to shame. The streets are clean. The bike lanes are beautiful. There's a technical university here which is attracting the best students from all over Europe. Right? There's a massive economic spin-off from that in terms of high-tech industries with well-paying jobs. I'm going to be honest with that. I know this is being recorded, but I'm on a salary here which most people in Scotland can't even imagine. And I'm not rich by the standards of the people around me here. Right? The level of the quality of life is just so different, and the expectations are so different. Right? There's nobody sitting in Delft in a cold building. I'm quite confident in that. There's nobody here who's worried about the cost of heating. And that comes from the fact that this is a developed country which has used its potential to the full. And the bit that gets me about Scotland, and the bit that infuriates me and drives me in all of this, is that Scotland is less than the sum of its parts. We have some very well-educated people. We have natural resources coming out of our ears. And yet the quality of life is consistently, for the vast majority of people, below that of other developed Northern European countries. So there's something that's not adding up here. And I think what it is that we have never developed Scotland. It's been used as a manpower resource. It's been used as a playground. It's been used as a parking lot. And what we need is a government that's actually going to say, how do we develop Scotland? And I don't mean development in terms of building houses and chopping down trees. I mean development in terms of building a high-tech economy for the 21st century, where we have the infrastructure, the education, the facilities we need to deliver a high quality of life for our citizens. And that's the bit that I think that all of this points to. All I'm doing here is trying to build institutional foundations. But that's not just because I want to see a pretty constitution, it's because I don't want to see children going to bed cold and hungry.
So connecting it to real life rather than it being this esoteric thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the key point there is about how the Constitution relates to good governance, and about how the Constitution is just a framework for creating a state that will serve the public interest of the people of Scotland better than the British state has done.
Good. Brilliant. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm glad we're recording this because I'm writing as fast as I can, but I want to go back and listen to it again. I think other people do too. Anything else for Elliot? Oh, Sandra.
I've got very emotional at the end of this, Elliot. Quite emotional, actually. The whole 2 hours has been an emotional roller coaster. Everything you say is absolutely spot on, and I couldn't disagree with one single sentence. My daughter lives in the Netherlands. My daughter and her family live there. They live in Hilversum. I go there a lot, and when I go, I land. As soon as I land into Schiphol, I know I'm in a far superior place to what I've left behind in Glasgow Airport. And as soon as I come back, I know I've come back to Glasgow Airport. The whole, everything you say about the streets, about the cycle lanes, about cycles and cars and pedestrians all working quite happily together. No one wants to run over a cyclist because they're going too slow in front of you. There's no animosity between them all. And their living conditions and the shops, and they don't open on Mondays. They open at, oh no, they open at 10 o'clock. It's Tuesday. Yeah, but I think they open at 10 o'clock. And yet still they're an economic powerhouse. And the health of and they're happy just walking along. We get quite emotional. They're happy just walking along the street. You're walking in and out of shops, and the atmosphere is so different. I'm in another world.
Yeah.
And that's what we're fighting for right now, is to make this country, that country, to make it like that.
A normal European
Thank you so much. That's the most wonderful,
Mhm.
wonderful 2 hours I've ever spent, ever, listening to somebody. Thank you so very much. It was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
But before we go, if we stop recording, I have a quick question I'd like to ask people off the record.
Okay, I'll do it.